Having looked at the cybernetic view of the person as the viable system model, we now turn our attention to a cybernetic view of communications with the theory of the German sociologist Nikolaus Luhmann. Luhmann had a view of communication where individuals had a psychic system, and by engaging with the communication system, individuals would utter communications, and those communications became information, and then that information was perceived by other psychic systems to be interpreted into meaning, which would then cause further utterances, which then became information, which then was interpreted into meaning, and so on. And you can see this process happening in the little animation that I'm showing here. So the psychic systems generate utterances which become information, which are interpreted into meaning. Now the key concept for Luhmann is that communications can be successful when they reproduce themselves through being uttered by a number of individuals. So for example, here's a communication from one psychic system which is uttered, "I love football." The other psychic system sees this information or perceives the information, it becomes meaning, and this psychic system recognizes, "Wow, I love football too. Who's your favourite team?" And through this mechanism, there is a successful communication about football between these two individuals, these two psychic systems that utter successful communications about football. So here we're just showing here the communications about football. Now here's an alternative scenario. One of the psychic systems is now making the communication, "I love ballet dancing." So they utter this, it goes into the communication system, it's perceived as meaning, and the other psychic system thinks, "Eh? I hate ballet dancing." I don't want to engage. I don't want to have this discussion. Now, from the perspective of the first person who uttered this communication, this communication is unsuccessful because it's not reproduced. Now, educational institutions like schools and universities try to maximize the probability that communications will be successful by dividing the sorts of communications that they support into the subjects in the curricula. So for example, in an educational institution I can make a communication like, "Do you know how to do this maths problem?" And the other psychic system might say something like, "Ah yes, someone showed me how to do that the other day." And so this becomes a successful communication, which is made more probable by the fact that the institution has a curriculum which determines the sorts of communications that take place. So the challenge in teaching and learning is for teachers to find ways in which they can have successful communications with their learners. And this means that they have to develop some understanding of how learners interpret meaning and how learners make new utterances, or why they might not make utterances. Let's consider an example. Here's a teacher and a learner. The teacher's trying to explain something, and the learner isn't responding, or isn't responding in the way that she thinks she ought to. So the teacher's thinking, why is this learner not responding to the question I asked? And she's also thinking, what sort of question should I ask if I am to have successful communications with the learner? The learner, at the same time, is thinking, what does she want me to say? So there's this relationship going on between the two of them as they're trying to adjust their own personal communication systems, their own personal viability with the communication that's happening between them. Now I've replaced the teacher and the learner with two viable systems. And so I'm trying to illustrate that these thoughts are coming through the processes of maintaining the individual viability of the teacher and the individual viability of the learner, and that between these two viable systems there is some sort of communication going on between them. The purple box at the top says positioning, and that's meant to indicate the fact that each of these viable systems is trying to position the management of itself and the communications that it makes against the viability and management of communication of the other one. So the purple box for the teacher is trying to change the regulating mechanisms within the teacher so that they can make communications that will be successful with the learner. We'll do this through changing the various regulating mechanisms, so system 4 and system 3, and that in turn will of course affect systems 1 and systems 2.